We're here to talk about the educational experiences of children experiencing homelessness and in foster care. I'm Kristen Kelly. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit in more detail, but before we do that, I have a couple of administrative things. The first is that special thanks to the ABA Center on Homelessness and Poverty. They are the hosts of today, and they have provided all in attendance with their very recently released book, Educating Children Without Housing. We have copies available for all of you. There's also some extra copies out front, so if you want to grab one on the way out and bring it to your colleagues, please do. These are for sale for $14.95, but they wanted me to let you know that they also have group discounts available. So if you're interested in getting these for a group of people in your office or for a training or something like that, please let them know. Another thing is that we ask that you will please complete the evaluation and turn that in on your way out at the front desk. And then finally, there's also some flyers if you want to bring these flyers about the book to sort of tell people about the book and let them know where they can purchase it. All right, one final thing, if you are in need of CLE and you have any questions, please ask at the front desk and they will be happy to help you with all of that. So as I said, my name's Kristen Kelly. I am a staff attorney with the American Bar Association Center on Children and the Law. That's based in Washington, D.C. And I have had the luck of, for the past 8 years, working almost exclusively on the overlap between child welfare and education. And so a project that I work on is called the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later and give you some resources. I can't ever talk to any group without doing a little bit of a commercial for my project, but we provide training and technical assistance around the country on sort of the overlap between child welfare and education. But as an attorney, I especially like working with attorneys because I think that you have some of the best opportunities to really advocate and make real change, both at the system level and also at the direct case level. Rainey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Rainey Hayback. I've been an attorney for more years than I care to remember. And I work primarily in the area of the educational rights of homeless children, who, as you may or may not know, are in foster care in some cases and out of foster care also. The homeless children may have nothing to do with the foster care system. But I also have a history of doing foster care systems litigation and have represented individual kids and families in juvenile court. So I'm very happy to be here today. It looks like we have a rich and interesting audience, and we hope to have participation and interaction and not just all talk at you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ashley Fredhold. I am a staff attorney at LAF here in Chicago, Legal Assistance Foundation. We are the largest provider of free civil legal services in Cook County, which is the county that Chicago is in, for those of you who aren't from around here. But I work very specifically on one contract. We have a contract with the local child welfare agency, DCFS, to provide legal representation to children who are in the foster care system whenever they have an education issue. So my caseload is entirely mostly special education cases, but also a lot of school discipline, and then a smattering of some other stuff, but all children who are in the foster care system. So my experience today comes from the perspective of what's kind of going on in Cook County and from the perspective of someone who's doing direct representation work right now. And I just want to kind of briefly introduce our other panelists. This is Antoinette Jones, and she's going to explain her background in a second, but she's here today because she's currently a youth who's in the foster care system, and she's been a great advocate within the system for other youth and being on the youth advisory panel, so we've asked her to be here today. She's going to talk a little bit about her experiences to start us out, and then she's going to jump in where she feels the need as we go along, but we really wanted you to have a first-person account of what's going on. So, Antoinette?
Hi, my name is Antoinette. I've been in foster care for as long as I remember. I was told I got taken from my parents at 2 years old. The situation was my father, he was fighting for me to come back home, but he had got incarcerated. and my mother, she was on drugs, so she couldn't take care of us. So my first foster home was here in Chicago. I believe on the west side. I stayed with the foster parent for a couple of years. And then they moved me out of the house with my second set of foster parents in St. Charles. I stayed there until I was like 4 or early 5. They found out that I had siblings, like 5 or 6 siblings that were already placed in foster care in Lockport at the SOS Children's Village. So they placed me there with my siblings so I can get to know them and so they can know, yeah, you have another addition to the family. So my foster mom, I've been having I had the same foster mom ever since I was 5 years old. She's been taking care of me and my siblings. She has helped all of us get through high school and, you know, grammar school. She's our backbone, basically. We still communicate with her. She's still there. She's been there for almost, I could say, 20 years or more. My experience, I went to elementary school out there. I went to Fairmont Elementary. It's in Lockport. I went there all the way through 8th grade. 8th grade year, I kind of fell off because I got distracted by things going on in the household and things going on within the school. And I had to repeat my 8th grade year. My second year, I did better. I had honor roll for about 3 quarters straight. I graduated from 8th grade there at Fairmont and went to Lockport Township High School. I went to go attend Lockport. That's why I started my freshman year at Lockport. I got pregnant towards my sophomore year. End of my freshman year, I got pregnant. I continued to go to school all the way up until my due date. I had my son during the summer. July 31st, I had my son during the summer, right before I was about to start my sophomore year. So it was a good thing I didn't really miss any time. So I went right back into school. I started going. It made things a little bit harder having a newborn at home. Even though I had my mom there with me, it made it a little bit harder because at the same time I had to be there for my child. He had a doctor's appointment. I had to take him to the doctor's appointment. So it was kind of hard managing school and a child at the same time. But I did my best as I can at Lockport. Me and my mom weren't seeing eye to eye, and I didn't really want to hear what she was really telling me about how to take care of my child. I wanted to be hard-headed, so I talked to my case manager at the time, and I told her I was interested in moving into a TLP. They brought a lot of TLPs to the table. All of them were here in Chicago. So I looked at a lot of them. I got approved for it. I moved to the east side of Chicago, to the first TLP. The Pensier was the name of the TLP that I was with. And then I guess they got taken over by UCAN, which I'm with UCAN now. UCAN they're really good. Like, they have really good workers. My parenting worker is here. She helps me take care of my child, daycare, anything I need for my son, she helps me with it. We have case managers, you have therapists, you have everything there. So I really like UCAN. So we lived there. I went to South Shore. South Shore, you can't really stay focused in the school. There's too much going on. So I tried to stay focused, but I got thrown off. I was like, okay, this stuff I learned 8th grade year. Why am I going over it again? It's like the work was dumbing me down, and I already knew it. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to stop going. So I stopped going to school. I missed like 38 days, but I still passed. Because when I went back, I made up all my work. I still passed. So I didn't stay at South Shore too long. I tried to transfer to Hyde Park. My education liaison asked me what was my reasoning for trying to transfer, and I told them because the work was not challenging enough. So I went to Hyde Park. Their enrollment was already closed, and they said my attendance was holding me back from South Shore. So I had to go back and reinstate in South Shore, and I stayed there until we had to move from our TLP on the east side to the west side, because our building was messed up, which I felt like it was a new beginning for me, new school, new everything. So we moved on the west side. I attended CCA Academy. They told me it was a high school right around the corner from my house, but I chose not to go there because the things I heard about CCA was that even through your hardest challenges, they help you. You know, you have workers, mentors, everything. So it's an alternative school. It's real small, but they're really good at helping their students. So I went there to finish off my sophomore year. Really my junior year, because I finished most of my sophomore year at South Shore. Junior and senior year, I attended CCA. At this time, I was kind of going through the struggles of me being in charge of my son. I didn't have my mom there anymore, so he gets sick, I had nobody to take him to. I have to stay at home. I'm missing school, I'm missing classes. So that was kind of, my attendance was kind of holding me back junior year. But I talked with my caseworker, and she told me, my worker and them, they told me to basically put something together where I can have somebody that's going to keep him when he's sick, or work out a plan. So I started to do that. I started to call my stepmom and my brothers and other siblings. When he gets sick, I just take him to them, or for the weekend, and I just go right to school so I don't have to travel and try to make it back. So I got back on track. I had honor roll third quarter and fourth quarter at CCA. I was also enrolled. I was working with the aquaponics program at our school. The aquaponics program is with the fishes. You learn how to work. You work with the fishes. You take care of the fishes and produce. You're producing food basically to feed the plants without actually harming the plants indoors though. So we had a whole fish system set up indoors where we were growing all kinds of vegetables. We sold the vegetables we were connected to another school, the culinary arts school. We sold our vegetables to them, and they cooked, different dishes. So I was with the aquaponics program for a while. I worked with them 2 summers. That was our summer job. Just because we were wards of the state, YS3 is another program called YS3 that works through the schools for wards of the state. They paid us, basically. They paid us for working. They gave us something to do over the summer. So I worked for them. Then senior year, I came back to school. I had a full schedule, 4 classes. I went in. I felt like I needed to finish it. I was already ready to get out. So I finished 2 of my classes. They were online classes. I finished before anybody. The first 2 weeks of school, I finished my classes and passed. One with the A, and I passed the other one with 87%. So they basically asked me did I want to tutor other children in school. I wasn't really, okay with that, but I'll sit there and, if they had a question, I'd help them with it. I didn't really want to tutor, but during the time I didn't have class, I was working with the aquaponics, working outside in the garden. So that's most of my senior year, because it consists of working and helping other youth in the school. The YS3 program, they help wards of the state. They work with every alternative school in high school. If you're a ward of the state, they come talk to you. They ask you, how's your school schedule? Are you happy with your classes? How are you being treated? Basically like a worker, but only for your high school reasons. So graduation time came around. We had prom. We went to prom and everything. I can say that my senior year was much easier because my son, him getting sick and all that really kind of slowed down. So he was okay in daycare. He had a set daycare, and me and the daycare lady had a really good relationship. So I didn't really have any downfalls senior year, but personal within my TLP, stuff going on with other girls in the building, just a lot of that going on. But so far as school, I feel I did better my senior year. So graduation came around. We graduated June 14th. From CCA, we graduated at Malcolm X College. And I went straight. Well, I graduated in the top 10 students, one of the top 10 students of the school for honor roll. So we had a certain sash that we wore because we were in the top 10. After graduation, it was the summertime. We took a little break off, but I went right back into school. I enrolled in Malcolm X College on the west side of Chicago. I did my first semester there. That's where I really hit, like, a lot of other issues started coming up about me not wanting to get up and go to class. Sometimes I was just being lazy, didn't want to get up and go to class. But once my teacher, really talked to me, like, you can't, it's somewhat like high school, but it's not. You need to come to class. So I try to pull it together. I passed 3 of my classes. I have to take 1 over again, but I passed majority of my classes. Daycare he was still with the same daycare lady. We still had the same relationship. Yeah, he had his days where he got really sick and I couldn't take him. Because when he gets a cold, his bronchitis acts up with it. So I had to really, take care of him. I couldn't, it's no excuses for that, so I'll stay home. But towards the end of the semester, I pulled it together, and I turned in assignments that I didn't really have in. But my main struggles was, I wouldn't say child care, but it was the fact that the illness of my child, me staying home, or me being tired from the day before, the night before, and not wanting to go to class. So now I attend daily college, and I got approved for ILO. I got my apartment on the east side of Chicago, me and my son. I got approved for ILO in November. ILO is Independent Living Organization. TLP is basically a transitional living program. It gets you ready to live on your own. You get ready to live in your own apartment, paying bills, and they teach you budgeting. When you go meet with your case manager every month, they lay out a budget, and they have you work out, they have you put the numbers down and add everything together to see where your money goes. So it was really helpful. The TLP was really helpful. But now I live and I pay my gas bill and my electric bill, but it's still there because they pay our rent up until you emancipate. So now I'm living in my apartment, and I go to daily college, Pulaski, and I like it. It's a different environment. It's more, I can focus more now. So.
Thanks, Andrew. Does anyone have any questions for Antoinette about her experience or any questions around her education? She's obviously a pretty remarkable young woman. She's highlighted some of the challenges of being in foster care, but has really persevered because of how remarkable she is. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, in the back, sorry. That's you in the gray.
Oh, I was just wondering, I used to work as an education liaison in McLean County, Bloomington, and we received a lot of TLP ILO cases in McLean County. And the thing that disturbed me was that the teachers found out the child was a ward of the state, and they acted like the child was just completely opposite than every other student. They didn't want to help them as much. They didn't want to provide the support as much. And I'm just wondering, in your situation, did you have teachers who were really involved, or did you find yourself kind of in a catch-22 where some were, and then the ones that tried to stand up for you, they were shunned because others wanted to treat you as just a ward?
I dealt with that when I went to Lockport. When I stayed in Lockport in my first high school years, I felt it was different for us that were wardens. The teacher didn't treat us as they treated the rest of the students. I dealt with that at Lockport, but since I've been here in Chicago, my teacher's been really open to helping us, and they don't use it just because you're a ward of the state. They ask you about your situation. They know you have a child, so they try to work with you. But I dealt with that when I was in Lockport. I felt like the teachers weren't really there helping me at all because of my situation.
Actually, have you chosen a major? Do you know what career you want to go into?
Nursing.
What made you choose that?
I like I told my mama, since I was little, like I used to enjoy going to the hospital. I know it's weird, but I used to enjoy it. I enjoy going to the hospital. Like out of all my siblings, out of all 5 of us, we all go get our blood drawn. It's time to go back to school. I'm the only one that's like, Mom, look, and everybody else is just like, oh. So yeah, I don't know. It's just I like helping other people. Like my stepmom, she's a home nurse. She goes to people's houses and help. I've been with her a couple of times. So yeah, I just like helping other people.
Other questions? All right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. As you've been through the system, the federal and state homeless law talk about districts removing barriers to accessing education and getting to school. And I'm not talking about having a child at such a young age. I know that's difficult, but in your experience, what are the biggest barriers to you getting to school, staying in school? I mean, what would you? It's easy for us to look at that and hear.
One of the barriers were moving, the moving situation, and having to meet new people, having to deal with new teachers. You get attached to certain teachers, and then you have to move and meet all new teachers and get attached to them. Once I'm attached to somebody, I'm attached. Like it's hard for me to disattach and get attached to somebody new. So Lockport was my life. I've stayed out there 15 years, and it's a real small town, so everybody knows everybody. So I left behind friends, and my foster mom. The biggest problem was leaving her behind because I've been with her so long. So yeah, it was basically not seeing my siblings. I haven't seen my siblings since I moved. None of them. I haven't seen them since I moved from Lockport. But in the education, it was just, I was happy to find a new school that was, taking me in, helping me with my situation. But it was getting attached to new teachers and advisors and college counselors, and that was the hardest part, getting attached to new things.
Yes.
I'm in a school district very close to Lockport, Bolingbrook and Romeoville. How do you feel about your teachers knowing that you had McKinney-Vento status or homeless? That's something we look at in terms of privacy versus maybe being able to get a special extra assistance. What's your take on that?
Sometimes it made you feel like just because you were ward of state, you didn't get the certain care that you didn't get the certain attention that other students got. Because I can't say me, but I know a couple of people I live with in the SOS village. They go to school having so much on their shoulders that they dealt with at home, and they're letting their teachers know, and it's just like it didn't mean anything. Like, okay, that's at home. Why are you bringing it to school type of situation? But yeah, I mean, it was just certain things that just made you feel like they didn't really care about your situation. So I wasn't one to go talk to a counselor at my school I attended. I felt like it wasn't helpful.
Thank you. In the very back.
Hi. Thanks for sharing your story. Could you say, what allowed you to keep going and not give up? What allowed you to just keep going? I'm studying resiliency, in African American adolescents. And you're exactly one of those examples. So I would just like to know, what made you not give up and just keep going?
Probably because the fact that I had a child so young. I watched my sister. My sister, she ran away from our foster home and had a baby so young. And she chose not to come back, but at the same time, she chose to try to go back and get her education. And, watching her kind of motivated me. My foster mom and my son himself. My foster mom was a major part in me continuing going to school because she pushed me forward. So I can say that she's like the most inspirational person that I deal with in my life is my foster mom.
Any other questions? All right, could I just see a show of hands just so that we can see sort of who's in the audience? Are there any children's attorneys here? So dependency attorneys or delinquency attorneys? A couple? Okay, how about any caseworkers? Okay, education attorneys? How about any non-attorney advocates? All right, any judges or magistrates? How about any teachers? All right. How about any students? All right, anyone else? Oh, a couple others. Wow, okay, this is a very multidisciplinary audience. That's great to see. All right, great. Well, Rini, do you want to talk us through some of the...
Just to be clear, I did want to say that Antoinette's experience did not include homelessness. She was a ward of the department, and we are combining a discussion of the Fostering Connections to Success Act with McKinney-Vento today. Thank you so much, Antoinette. That was fantastic. This is what many of us live for, right? Is to see a young person really get what they need and be able to move forward. So it's very nice for all of us as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the McKinney-Vento Act. And let's look at first the causes of homelessness. I think they're pretty straightforward in a way. Lack of affordable housing, major obstacle, probably everybody in this room knows that's true. The condition of severe poverty. There's extreme poverty throughout the United States. My other session heard a lot about that today. In Illinois, extreme poverty has increased since 2006 when Illinois formed its Commission for the Elimination of Extreme Poverty. it has now 160,000 more people living in extreme poverty, which is roughly half of the federal poverty level. Health problems and costs. You know, a lot of our families have medical debt, and that's why they lose their housing. Many people don't know that. Discrimination. Racial discrimination being a key form of discrimination, but also against young people, against families with children, against people with disabilities. Domestic violence is a big factor, and we work with families, some of whom experience it some of the time, some experience it worse than others, some don't experience it at all. But when it occurs, it disrupts people's living situation. Natural and other disasters, I know we're all familiar with that across the country, maybe New Orleans being the biggest example of that after Hurricane Katrina. Abuse and neglect, unaccompanied youth frequently go on run, leave the system, are in non-permanent situations in foster care. Criminal record screening, you know, a lot of folks have, convictions, and that will actually be a barrier to their obtaining housing or employment. Who are the children and youth experiencing homelessness? This gives you the national number of the kids identified and enrolled pre-K through 12th grade in 2011 and 2012. Almost 1.2 million children. To me, really shocking. There's been a 72% increase since the start of the recession. And for the last year, Illinois Public Schools reported 51,638 homeless students identified. 51% of homeless kids in shelters are under the age of 6. So thinking about preschool, early child development, you see how important that is. And the average income of a homeless family is less than half the federal poverty line, what I identified as extreme poverty a minute ago. Homelessness presents a lot of problems for young people. Living with strangers in a strange house, strange room, strange bed, different rules, different routines. The other day I heard about a situation where a family with whom a family was doubled up used the bathroom in the morning, leaving it to the doubled up family to use it last, causing tardiness and a truancy problem at school. That's a typical kind of a thing that we see. Different routines, no privacy, especially during a period of adolescence. And obviously if you had a child with you, as many of our young homeless students do. And really I'm talking about entire families, not just students. Concerns about safety. A lot of our folks are living in situations where people let them live and they don't have control over everyone who's there, and they aren't people they would choose if they had alternatives, but they want a roof over their head, especially with children. Families will become separated. The shelter does not want a teenage boy, even though that's unlawful and violates the Fair Housing Act. They don't want a 13 or 14-year-old boy. So families may have to send that child elsewhere, or they may choose to separate from their children because they don't want the children to go through this kind of experience that they're going through, and relatives may accept the kids. Places that are overcrowded and unsanitary, very typical in our work, certainly in Chicago, but in the area as well. Severe poverty, no possessions, not access to the things that you need to do a project for science class. Basic things missing, like the right shoes or a coat or a uniform. Poor health, and perhaps no access or enrollment in health insurance, even though that is eligible to minor children, and under the Medicaid expansion now, that will be available to older youth. poor nutrition. When you're living in someone else's house or you're living in a shelter, we've had many situations where the shelter cuts off food at a certain point, the kitchen is shut down, you're not going to get a snack. If you're hungry, you're not going to get more, even though you're a teenager. And uncertainty about the future. Where are you going to be tonight? We had one youth who described his situation as living without a key. A lot of people said it was okay for him to stay this night or that night, but when he'd show up, if he didn't have a key, it didn't matter. If he couldn't get in or be assured of coming back, he just moved on place to place, and sometimes not very safe places. What are the experience of students in homeless situations? 40% of our students attend 2 different schools a year. 28%, 3 or more different schools. I know you've all heard something about the harmful effects of school mobility. Coupled with residential mobility, that's a double whammy, both developmentally for kids and also in terms of their behavior. Homeless children are 4 times more likely to have delayed development, twice as likely to have disabilities, but they're significantly less likely to be counted in special ed and get those services. 1/3 of homeless students will repeat a grade.
So we're today talking about school instability, and it's really 2 separate groups of students that we're talking about. Students involved in the child welfare system and students that are experiencing homelessness. But there's a lot of overlap between these 2 populations. In fact, the same student might go back and forth between the 2 systems. There are less children in the foster care system than experiencing homeless. It's just under 400,000 children in foster care. Of special importance for our discussion today, which is around education, 62% of those children are school age. There's a lot of misperceptions about the child welfare system from people that aren't working in the system. The 50%, almost 47% of kids in the child welfare system are in the system for less than a year. So when you're talking about school stability and the importance of remaining in the same school, of course it makes sense to try and keep kids in their same school, especially given the percentage of them who are going to be out of the child welfare system within a year. Just the same reasoning goes, 51% of children in the child welfare system are going to be returning home to the parent that they were removed from, and oftentimes returning back to that same school where the parent is, which is of course even more justification for trying to keep children in the same school. I think that for people outside the child welfare system, there's a little bit of a misperception that children enter the child welfare system and sort of live with one foster family and then eventually are adopted or return home. But the reality is that there's really high living placement instability for students in the child welfare system, both when they initially enter care and then while they're in care, there's oftentimes frequent living changes as well, which, as we've talked about, really impacts their school changes. And then the final thing that I think people don't all realize when you're not working in the child welfare system is that 27,000 students, children in the child welfare system, never get adopted or return home or achieve permanency, is what it's called, when their case is closed. And instead, when they reach 18, or in some states like Illinois, 21, they're just sort of graduated from the system and on their own, and they no longer have any supports in place. And so this is, the education outcomes for those students in particular are extremely poor, which is why there's sort of even more of a challenge to the advocates in the room to really fight to try and make sure that students in care get all the supports that they need and are able to achieve permanency.
So you'll notice this slide looks familiar, and that's because, again, these 2 groups are experiencing many of the same challenges because of all their mobility that's going on in their life. I also just want to make a quick note, we're using the terminology youth in out-of-home care, or youth in the child welfare system, or youth in foster care, and really we mean those interchangeably. I think sometimes to say youth in foster care can be misleading, because we definitely have children in the child welfare system who are living in group homes, who have not been able to have been placed in a foster home for one reason or another. And so I think it's important to keep in mind that we're also talking about children who don't even have a foster parent necessarily sometimes. So these are some of the challenges that children in out-of-home care are facing. They've been removed from their home, from their parents, possibly from their siblings. There are efforts normally to keep siblings together, but many times they might be broken apart if it's a large group of siblings especially. They may not have had a chance to say goodbye to the other family members. They may be uncertain about where their parents or other siblings are living. This is all especially true when a child first comes into the foster care system. And it might have been somewhat of a traumatic removal. There might have been police involved. It might have been a very confusing moment for that child. They are likely now living with strangers in a strange house, strange room, new bed, different customs, different routine, maybe a totally different environment in the household than what they're coming from. And if we're talking about a child who's been in the system a while, this might be true every time they change their foster care placement. This whole thing starts over. And there might be other children in the home. There might be children of the foster parent, and there might be other foster children, but all of a sudden they're living with possibly peers who they have are complete strangers to them. They might leave initially with few or even none of their possessions. They might be in a new neighborhood. They might be even in a new city. It's not entirely uncommon in Cook County to see children who live in the city of Chicago and are placed in the suburbs or vice versa. That can be a huge change in environment. And they, as we're going to talk about, likely are also changing schools many times. And they're also facing a lot of uncertainty about their future. They may not know, where am I going to be living in a month, in 2 months, in a year? Am I going to go back to my parents? Where am I going to be going to school next? They might be facing uncertainty about what's going on with my parent. They might be aware that maybe their parent is facing some sort of criminal case related to the reason that they are now in care. There was, for an example, an abuse situation. They might be experiencing feelings, obviously trauma related to that, but oftentimes you'll find the kind of confusing sense in where a child can be very defensive of a parent who possibly is accused of being abusive or neglectful, because that's their parent and they love them. And you also have children that are uncertain about where their siblings are living and how they're doing, and obviously that causes a lot of stress to them. And I think it's important, like I said, that this is all true when children first come into the system, but then also every time they change a placement. And right now, some studies have shown that children in foster care are averaging 1 to 2 changes in residential placements a year. That's a lot. So focusing on educational experiences. What are the educational experiences of students in out-of-home care? 56 to 75% of foster youth first change schools when they first come into the foster care system. Foster children in the foster care system are 2.5 to 3.5 times more likely to be receiving special education. They're more likely to repeat a grade. They're 3 times as likely not to have a high school diploma or a GED, and that's based on alumni studies of students who have now aged out of the system. They're nearly 6 times more likely to not have a post-secondary degree, more than twice as likely to be suspended, and more than 4 times as likely to be expelled from school. I think when you look at stats like this, you also see that, you know, Antoinette is a remarkable example because she's managed to kind of break these barriers, and sadly she's the exception. But we hope that in the course of having this conversation and hopefully advocating for these needs, some of these numbers can be changing. Some other stats that we didn't put up there, but I just wanted to kind of throw out there that are on this same course, that 2/3 of students who are in foster youth care in the U.S. attend 3 or more elementary schools over the course of their elementary career, and the other 1/3 attend at least 5. So I doubt there are many of us, maybe unless you were a military family, who went to that many different elementary schools during the course of our education. And you can imagine just kind of obviously how difficult that can make things. And just Okay, so again, we've said, what's the connection between foster care and homelessness? They're obviously experiencing some of the same challenges, but there's also some direct overlap. 12% of homeless children have been placed in foster care compared to 1% of other children. So obviously, that's disproportionate to the normal population. 30% of children in foster care could be returned home if their parents had access to housing. And 25% of youth aging out of foster care, being emancipated, experience homelessness. Okay, so what are some barriers to education? What are some things that are preventing these two groups from having educational success? Enrollment requirements. When a child has to be enrolled in school, oftentimes you need records from their old school, immunization records, transcripts, especially if they're in high school and they want credits to transfer, proof of residence. All of these things are normally asked for when you walk in the front door of a new school, and getting these records can be a big challenge for both of these groups. High mobility, obviously, as we're kind of overall discussing, results in lack of school stability and a lack of educational continuity. And that can be especially true, or especially, I guess, harmful for students who are receiving special education services. You know, a school can kind of figure out what does this child need to help them learn, what services, what support, and then they change schools, and the new school has to relearn that child and how is the best way to teach them. Again, education records can just be missing entirely. You know, I've had cases come in where I would, you know, the student maybe came into care when they were, you know, 8 or 9. It seemed from the records and from talking to the child that perhaps they had an IEP, but we were, which is a special education plan, but we were entirely unable to find those school records despite multiple records requests, and the caseworker couldn't find anything. So here we have a child that, you know, once you're eligible, you should always be eligible for special education unless they exit you. And we were going to have to start that whole process to get him eligible again. So that's a big downside to, again, not having those records. A lack of transportation for kids who are moving residences but yet are going to stay in that school. Getting that transportation can be a huge obstacle. A lack of awareness by school personnel, either a lack of awareness that this child actually is experiencing maybe some homelessness, or lack of awareness of how to best address that and support it. A lack of focus on education. You know, sometimes child welfare agencies are kind of, you know, in a crisis mode with certain children, and they're trying to just get this child in a home that's safe and stable, and kind of are prioritizing that, and sometimes education can fall by the wayside. A lack of communication between agencies. It's kind of similar to the one before. A lot can be experiencing poor health, fatigue, hunger, violence and bullying. You know, sometimes bullying because of the status of being homeless. I just had a case recently where my client was called out on Facebook by another student for being a broke-ass foster kid. I mean, that can't feel good, and that's, you know, a soft spot obviously for that student. Obviously, a lot of children, especially children in foster care, are experiencing trauma and also have a higher incidence than the general population of mental health issues. And there's, of course, bias regarding children in foster care, regarding children experiencing homelessness, and a lot of stigma and misunderstanding about what all that means. So I think that's a nice quote. Why does school matter? You know, education can be kind of a stabilizing force for a child, or it can exacerbate the problem. So I think that's an important thing to consider. Building up on that, a school can be a safe haven, it can be an oasis, it can be the stable thing in a child's life. Even if they do change schools, sometimes the school can be the place where they go and they know the routine and it all feels safe and secure to them. It can also be the opposite. So obviously we want it to be that oasis and that place of stability. And also, you know, as we all know, education can be critical for successful adulthood. Youth with a high school diploma in general earn about $9,000 more per year than those without a diploma. And youth in foster care we're significantly less likely to be employed at ages 25, 26, and their jobs are generally paid less and offered fewer hours. And you can draw from that that that's in large part due to the fact that they have lower educational outcomes.
Okay, so something great happened in 1987, which is as part of the United States general response to the growing problem of homelessness, they passed the McKinney-Vento, what was then the Stuart B. McKinney Act, and a portion of that act addressed the educational needs of homeless students. It was a rather vague statute at the time, and it's been reauthorized multiple times since then and become quite a powerful law. So that is the law that has governed so much of what we do nationally on behalf of homeless kids. But I think we deserve some bragging rights here in Illinois because a number of advocates, myself included, back in 1994 worked towards passage of the Illinois Education for Homeless Children Act, which also governs here in Illinois and provides some additional very important things that differ from the federal law. Main themes of this law are really the things we were discussing as problems. School stability is afforded by the law. School access to everything, activities and programs. Support for academic success. It is the obligation of school districts now to review and revise practices and policies that may act as barriers for students to enrollment, attendance, and success. And the law provides for a best interest decision making for choice of schools, but the parent's decision is given heavy weight. And at this point, I just want to say Illinois differs because under our statute, the parents make the best interest decision. Every state has to have a state coordinator for the education of homeless children and youth. And I'm happy to say that Illinois state coordinator, Jeff Aronowski, is here today. You want to stand for a minute, Jeff? So people could talk to Jeff afterwards. I'm sure he could answer some questions. But it's very important to have someone at the helm who understands the law and works to implement it. That makes all the difference. The state agency has a coordinator, and that coordinator must collaborate responsibilities across agencies and with the communities. They must provide technical assistance to local education agencies, which are basically school districts. They must ensure compliance with the federal law, that professional development is done, and there's a series of data collection and reporting that the state has to manage from the school districts to report to the feds, and which I'm proud to say Illinois makes available to the public as well. Every LEA, that is school district, has to designate a liaison. So you've got the state coordinator, then every district has to have a liaison. Actually, here in Chicago, every school does, as a result of litigation that we've done against the Chicago Public Schools. For a lot of districts, one person isn't enough people. The job of the liaison for the district is to ensure that students are identified. That's the district's job. It's not the job of a parent or youth to say I'm homeless. Ensure that they're enrolled in and have full and equal access to all the programs. Link them with educational services, and this includes preschool, health services, a wide array of things. In fact, school activities would be included, obviously special education, and other important programs. There's also an administrative process under the McKinney-Vento law for dispute resolution, and Illinois' statute actually first really identified, and our policy now, what the proper practices should be with respect to those administrative hearings. There's also the obligation to inform parents, guardians, and youth of transportation and Title I funds, which many school districts get to support low-income education, can be used, now they can be used for transportation for homeless students, and they can also be used to support a liaison. So, who's homeless? Children who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, and it includes sharing the housing of others due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason. That makes up the vast majority of kids that we are working with who live in extreme poverty. Living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, campgrounds, if you don't have an alternative accommodation. And this applies, by the way, whether you're with your parents or separated from your parents as a student. Living in emergency or transitional shelters, public or private places, people don't live in, like an office, like the back of a truck, like a hallway, like the bus station. Migratory children who live in any of the, skipped one. Cars, parks, abandoned buildings, substandard housing, big category, and bus and train stations, etc. Migratory children can be considered homeless if they are governed by any one of these situations. And then the law also identifies unaccompanied youth, who are youth not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian and experience homelessness. Also, youth awaiting foster care placement are eligible. A number of states define that. Here in Illinois, we don't really define that, but really, we view placement as a permanent placement. So in our perspective, kids who are in the foster care system and their situation hasn't really settled down to permanency playing and permanent placement are considered homeless. And some youth who are or have been involved in the child welfare system are eligible regardless of the definition. Youth who've run away from foster placements and are living in a homeless situation, youth who've been abused or neglected living in a homeless situation, not yet placed in custody, and youth who've aged out living in a homeless situation. Now, it's very important what school choice is under the law, and homeless students have at least 3 choices. They have the choice to attend what we call their school of origin. That can be the school they last attended when permanently housed. Many of our kids want to go back to that time. It can also be the school that they were last enrolled in. So they have a choice there in terms of school of origin. If they choose a school of origin, they are entitled to have transportation paid for at the cost of the district. They also have the choice to go to the school nearest where they're actually living that other children go to. They have additional choices, however, that are not expressly set forth in the Act because they should have the same opportunity as any other child to get into a magnet or a charter or go through a selective enrollment process or a school that's focused, for example, on a particular vocational choice for a child. All those choices should be made available to them as well, and school districts should plan and do that. Now, outside of Illinois, the local educational agency, in conjunction with the parent and the educational decision maker, the youth, the caseworker, if there is one, will get together and talk about choosing a school. And there are standards for, having a child-centered choice of schools. Because we're trying to achieve stability and continuity and preserve all those relationships we discussed, choosing a school for the continuity of instruction, looking at the age of the child and youth and safety concerns. Maybe they're in danger in a school. Maybe they're safer in a school they know what's going on in and they are used to. How long they're going to stay in their temporary living situation. Maybe it is better off to move at this time if they are going to be, in a lengthy temporary stay. Whether there's likely to be permanent placement eventually where the student is located. Students' need for special programs which may be available at one school as opposed to another. The effect of commuting a distance on a child. And really we feel, and Illinois policy says, education should be appropriate to the student. And by the way, students can cross district lines with respect to returning to a school of origin. And in that case, the districts have to share the cost of transportation. Where other siblings are placed may affect the decision, and how much time is left in the school year. If there's a disagreement, there has to be a dispute resolution process. And different states may differ on how they handle their process and some of the particulars that they do. But at a minimum, if the family objects to the school that's selected, or say a school district here in Illinois is refusing to admit a child, then that decision must be put in writing to let the parent know and to give facts about why that child can't go there anymore. What their view of it is, so that they can retain an advocate. And actually our office does a lot of that work.
Does youth have standing if they disagree with a parent and the school's determination on what the best placement for them is? In other words, parent and school agree this is your best school. Youth, adolescent says, no, I want to go to this other school. Does youth have standing in order to get to the appeal, the dispute resolution process?
That has never actually come up for us. I think one could make arguments about that. I think that at a minimum, the school district needs to hear what the youth wants. In terms of standing, it's kind of informal, but that's a good question. I'd say try it if you represent you.
They listen. I mean, that's what happened with me when I went to Lockport. They didn't really think I should have changed schools, even though I was moving. But I told them, how am I going to get all the way out here from there? They consider what the child's saying. They don't go fully with the parent.
And information must be provided to the parents about the dispute process. We have a lot of data about why stability matters. I think perhaps you pick that up from what we were discussing as barriers, but there's a lot of data there in the PowerPoint. Transportation must be to and from the school of origin. The parent or guardian should request it. We have special rules here in Chicago about how it's to be provided. You can now use Title I funds. That's a brand new thing. That's very important to a lot of school districts. If you're crossing lines, school districts share the expense. And when transportation is provided to other things within the school, that has to be provided to homeless students under the comparability requirement of the law. But also, within McKinney-Vento, enrollment means enrollment in all the activities of the school. And that includes participating in sports and after school, and transportation needs to be provided for that as well. Now, I'm a little short of time, so I'm going to hurry up a little bit. The wonderful thing about McKinney-Vento is when a family presents and they are identified as McKinney-Vento, they identify themselves as McKinney-Vento. In any one of those living arrangements we talked about, they don't have to use any magic words. They're entitled to immediate enrollment without records, without a physical examination, without an immunization, and then the schools have to work with the families to ensure that they get those services. But they don't have to run around to get a transcript or go get their old IEP, etc. And in fact, the law requires that school districts keep this material readily available if a child moves to another school. I said it requires immediate enrollment, and it is the job of the school to reach back and get records from the previous school. Okay, unaccompanied youth, who are they? We have a lot of data about unaccompanied youth. We defined them before. More or less, they've separated themselves in some situations, or in other situations, been separated from a parent or guardian. They can enroll themselves. And the liaison has special duties to work with unaccompanied youth to understand their wishes and work out whatever that youth needs, including, for example, credit recovery. The past few years, we've had a real push school districts that offer preschool, child find, those have to be offered to our kids as well. They cannot be excluded from that. There's always a question, are there enough slots? And there are solutions to that, including that where the child is located in preschool does not necessarily have to be near where they are actually living. So you could have the availability of a number of preschool sites within the district. I think I've mentioned access to all programs within the school and automatic eligibility for free breakfast, free lunch, which is very important. Schools also have to take care of fees for homeless children. There's wonderful fee waiver provisions in Illinois for all our kids, but for homeless kids in particular, they have to have the school district resolve fee issues. And I just want to say that some of my volunteer and interns are in the back of the room, and they brought with them a lot of materials about the educational rights of homeless students and fee waivers that are pertinent to Illinois. And if you want those, do you guys want to stand up, Olivia and Elisa? They will have materials if any of you want them.
So, what a great law. I know that for students in the child welfare system, Rini mentioned that some of them are eligible for the provisions of the McKinney-Vento Act, but the law really wasn't designed to serve all students in the child welfare system. And so there's a lot of advocacy that's going on right now at the federal level and also in many states to try and get similar rights and protections of the McKinney-Vento Act for students that are involved in the child welfare system. The good news is that there was one change to federal child welfare law in 2008 that really did at least lay some of the groundwork for trying to get school stability for children in the foster care system. Made it worse. There you go.
So we're going to talk really briefly about the Fostering Connections to Success Act of 2008. This was the first, it was a kind of widespread federal law about lots of different mandates for child welfare agencies regarding foster care. But we're focusing today on this one small provision of it related to educational stability. It doesn't provide anywhere near the same protections that McKinney-Vento provides to homeless students, but it does kind of go in that right direction and maybe providing a McKinney-Vento for kids in foster care. Okay, so one of the big requirements that we're focusing on, every foster child's case plan, so every foster child's case plan with the child welfare agency has to include assurances that they took into account the foster placement and how far it is from the school of origin. And it has to consider whether that new school is going to be appropriate for their setting. If the caseworker or the child welfare worker determines it would be in the child's best interest to stay in their school of origin when they move a foster care placement, then they are required by this to advocate with the school district to have that child stay in that school of origin. And it provides federal money to pay for the transportation to send them back to that school. What you'll notice about this, though, is that all of this and the entire Fostering Connections Act is mandates on child welfare agencies. It's not a mandate on school districts. And so certain states have written in these provisions into their state law. Some have made it very clear and put kind of stronger mandates in place for the school district. Some haven't really done that. So I think depending on the state you're in, you either find a school district that might look at you funny when you say, no, we decided it's in their best interest to stay, you have to let them stay in this school. And some states will be totally attuned to that. Another big provision of Fostering Connections Act is that the child welfare agency really has to ensure that the child is immediately enrolled in school if they're changing schools. That if they're not going to stay in their school of origin, it puts a requirement on them that they really make sure this child gets in school right away and that all their records are going with them and everything. One of the barriers to putting this in place before was FERPA. Obviously, school districts not wanting to violate FERPA were reluctant to hand over educational records to a caseworker. They would say, you know, we need a parent consent, we need something signed. So some recent changes to FERPA were made that now make it easier for our child welfare agency worker to get education records without a signed parent consent. So that's making some of these provisions a little bit easier for caseworkers.
All right, so as Ashley said, states really handle the implementation of fostering connections differently. In some, they have similar rights and protections to the McKinney-Vento Act on the education side. So for example, they might have a state law that allows all children in foster care to be immediately enrolled, even if they don't have school records. So for more information basically about how your state implements fostering connections, I encourage you to go to our project's website. That's www.fostercareandeducation.org. We have a couple of good resources there for you. The first is a searchable database. So you can search by your state, or if there's a specific topic that you're interested in, you can search by topic also. We also have a state stability chart, so you can actually go and look and see how your state interprets fostering connections in McKinney-Vento and what rights and services children in foster care are entitled to in your state. And at the very end of the PowerPoint, we have all of our contact information. I know that we all would be very open to getting questions from you. We know, a lot of the experiences that you might be dealing with in your day-to-day practices are things that are happening across the country all the time and that we deal with often. So please reach out and let us know if you have questions. We're definitely happy to point you in the direction of the right resources. That reminds me, the PowerPoint is available if you want the PowerPoint or any of the other materials that we've referenced. They're already up on www.ambar.org/homelessness, and that's the ABA Center on Homelessness and Poverty website.
Can you say that one more time?
Yes, and actually I better make sure that I'm saying the right one. It is ambar, ambar.org/homeless. So what we're here really to talk about, what can attorneys do and how can they make a difference? Before we get started, does anyone have any questions about the laws that we've gone over or any other questions about anything that we've talked about? Rich?
I still hear complaints from schools about the cost of transportation, even though they now have access to other funding streams through Title I. And I'm wondering if there's a role to be played by attorneys in trying to convince local school districts that that is a good investment. So that's not a legal rights question, but more about how do you support kids through this system when you're hearing complaints from the local school district that they're too expensive.
And that's for students in the McKinney-Vento program
Yes.
you're talking about.
Well, I think in fact that's really what we have to do. A lot of districts, they may think they don't have too many students. The law was 25 years old last year, and we still had districts where there was a problem with transportation. So I think, the way I look at this is what's not to like about it if you're an educator. First of all, your teachers are invested in the students they have. If they don't stay in the school of origin, that impacts all your teacher time. Maybe it impacts your football team. It impacts everything the school has done in its community to raise its test scores, to improve its attendance, etc. So I think just practical ways and ways that educators look at it. Stability in education makes a difference. We are amazed when schools, for example, institute the dispute process because they want someone to leave school in the second semester of their senior year. How is that a win for a school district? So really, I think stability can make the case for itself for folks who are really concerned about the well-being of kids' behavior, and academic achievement, as well as having a school community. In fact, there's some research that suggests that kids who remain after kids leave are actually impacted by the loss of that student in the classroom. So, and it's just so cost effective in most places. I think rural areas present a little bit more of a challenge.
Can I just say too that a lot of district superintendents are under enormous pressure from their boards to cut costs. To the extent that you can reach out to your actual boards and explain not just the state requirements, but the federal requirements as well, sometimes that helps.
I think that's the point, is that as attorneys, we have to be aware of the context in which we advocate, and we haven't run the public marketing campaign on this issue. Does that make sense? Most board members would say these kids are expensive, they're bad kids. I'm just telling you what I hear, and your language is great, Rini. I'm just saying, but we as advocates have to be smart about how to pitch this, not just to courts, but to the school boards and the superintendents and the people we deal with, or else we're not going to win the long-term battle, which is how do we improve outcomes for these children in our communities.
You know, that's true. I think a lot of more school districts are on board now. But one thing that we've done, Rich, is we have talked to school districts about having agreements, for example, with a kiddie cab company or a cab company, reaching a longer-term arrangement and using their leverage as a vendor, even doing it with another school district or with another organization where they can. You can also fundraise for it. People are enormously sympathetic to homeless children, and some districts raise money for a fund for homeless kids, and they can use that money. But really, there is now the Title I access, and the state of Illinois provides assistance for transportation as well. This year in Illinois, we are fighting for, and the State Board of Education has put in its budget, $3 million to go to school districts on a competitive basis to defray the cost of things, and transportation would be one. So I hope those of you in Illinois can support that.
Are there other questions? All right.
I'm wondering if I could turn things a little bit back to Antoinette at this point, because I think we'd be interested in hearing what you think attorneys can do, or what they have done for you in your situation.
Well, my GAL, I had the same attorney since I came into foster care. Me and my brothers and sisters have the same attorney. I never actually met her. She was like the lady behind the wall until, I got older. I actually sat down and met with her. She was coming out to my school, meeting with me, finding out what she can do. I love my attorney. A lot of attorneys that I know that work with the youth in care are really good attorneys. Even the attorneys that's not mine, they do what they can. They break their back just to help us. We have no problem in school, they help us. I can't really say anything they can do to make it better, because my attorney and the attorneys that I know do everything they can to help their clients. Yeah, that's about it. I can't really say anything bad about the attorneys, but
I just want to offer some other thoughts which I think are characteristic of our state. We have a legislature. I think every state has a legislature. Many states have a state board of education, or a state agency, or a state child welfare agency, or a county child welfare agency. All of those organizations have policies, implementation strategies. We as attorneys can propose and engage on questions of what should the policy be? What are the barriers? How can we all think about using the resources we have to address those barriers? And I think as attorneys, a lot of times we prevail if we encounter an individual problem and we think it through. We reduce it to paper, we make our arguments, maybe we call around and check with others that we know who've been in similar situations, and we begin to think of proposing something that's cohesive, drafting it up and putting it out for discussion with our local educational agency or our state educational agency, or in the child welfare context.
I was just going to say, right now we're in a pretty unique position because we have this contract with the state child welfare agency to provide representation. So all of my clients, they have their GAL, they have their caseworker, but I'm just doing their education case. And the fact that that exists as a resource for caseworkers is amazing. So if other states could replicate that, I'm sure some do have similar arrangements, it's a great way to really, when it comes down to that you really need an attorney to get this kid's rights enforced, at least there's someone available to the caseworker for them to call or for the foster parent to call. I'd also say as a part of that contract, we are going out and we do trainings. You know, whenever one of the child in Illinois, it's privatized, the caseworkers are all in different agencies. So we'll go out when they request it, and we'll do, you know, a CLE on school discipline so that we're spreading out kind of the legal information to the people that are really on the front lines, and so they're aware, okay, this is what kids in foster care, these are their rights in school, and so that they know when I'm in an IEP meeting and I hear this, ding, 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 like this is not what's supposed to be happening. So I think it's great to, you know, also, at least on the foster care side of things, be able to reach out to the agencies directly and kind of help educate them on the legal side of things.
I have a question. I work in Lake County Child Advocacy, and I wasn't aware that is LAF's contract only for Cook County children?
We only do Cook County, but there is a similar, Prairie State does it for Lake.
So Prairie State is for Lake, because my question when I've had problems with my cases is we often go to the DCFS regional. Yes. So which is the most effective way to get a result with our child in school? To go to Prairie State or to go to the DCFS?
Well, I would say if you need a lawyer, you should be calling us, and then we send you to Prairie State.
Okay.
That's how it works. But you know, obviously, we're getting involved to the point where the advocacy in the room that, you know, in our child welfare agencies here, several of them have educational liaisons, which basically just help caseworkers, which is another good idea, I think, at the foster care system, to have that kind of point person within the agency who really knows the education stuff. We're kind of like the last stop, right? We're at the point where we've tried advocacy, we've tried doing this, and they're just not budging, and we need a lawyer to come in and do something. But I think I see it as us being the last up, but also us being at the front end in terms of the educating child welfare workers. But you can talk to me after if you want specifics about how to send a case to us.
You know, I think that raises an interesting point, something Ashley said, because one strategy that we have at the Law Project of the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, our whole organization, our focus is to empower people who ordinarily find themselves disempowered. In fact, really out of control of the conditions of their life. They're in a shelter with rules, you know, hopefully their kids haven't been, but sometimes their kids are separated from them, either in child welfare or because they can't live together and be homeless at the same time. And so we think it's very important to educate the unaccompanied youth and the parents or the caregiver, whoever the you know, homeless youth is associated with, on asserting their own rights, being able to step up to the front desk of the school and say, excuse me, I was trying to enroll here, and now I've learned that I actually fall within this category, and I don't have a birth certificate, and I need my son in school today. We will work with our parents, who sometimes can be angry and frustrated, to educate them, give them our materials so they have something they can show, but also to kind of work down the anger and try to have a better approach to people at the front desk at school. So there are really a lot of different things that can be done, and I know LAF does a lot of community education, as does our organization. So for example, I know we have some social workers and caseworkers in the room today. We offer training to folks in that situation as well, so they know, you know, you don't need to go file a federal case to get a homeless child in school most of the time. You just need to invoke those magic words and maybe know Jeff's phone number, the State Board of Education's 800 number, or who the liaison is for the school district, which you can find on a website. I think even nationally we have that.
Yeah, here it is. It's the second one, the National Center on Homeless Education, center.serve.org-NCHE. They have a list of every state's state homeless coordinator. And they also have, for many states, the list of each individual school district's liaison also. So that's the second website right there.
Can we hear from some of the non-attorneys about what they think attorneys can do that would be positive in this field?
My name is Andrea. I work with Teen Learning Program, and I'm the education coordinator there. So I do specifically, the education liaison, like she was saying. So we have specific caseworkers that they sort of anything where the word education is involved, they default back to me. I've used your services, you work in the coalition, a lot to when I get involved. My position has been to sort of try to inform the young people that I work with. We work with 18 to 24, so to make sure that they're empowered to say, actually, I do get 2 uniform shirts, or I should be getting transportation. But also so that the caseworkers know if they hear like a red flag go off. And then usually by the time I go to a lawyer, it's because I didn't get that, or I've hit someone who's resistant. And the biggest problem that I found in the schools, and I would guess would say is something that as an attorney probably, this is where the dead ends get hit, is a liaison who is concerned about fraud, and so not giving students the things that they need, and denying students rights, even ones that are engaged in our services actively, as well as the schools themselves and the liaisons in the schools that are supposed to know these things, not knowing the law, not knowing what the young people are entitled to. So those are the biggest barriers. And so my first step when I initially hit a dead end is to go to the STLS liaison that oversees, like the coordinator that oversees all the liaisons, and then I identify who those are, and then I usually go to you guys after that. And the most supportive part is you guys being the heavy and enforcing those things, because usually I have to go back into that school for an IEP meeting, or to get their grades, or to talk about an issue that the student is having. So if I have to be the bad guy and police that situation as well, it makes my job and my relationship with the student in their school really, really challenging. So
I think, that's a really good point. Sometimes my involvement will start with just putting terms out there, showing a form letter and saying, you need to start using this term, and then you might see something change. And if that doesn't work, then I can write a letter, and sometimes a letter from someone with legal letterhead will get things moving, sadly, sometimes, than, someone who doesn't have a legal letterhead. So I think, sometimes just being that lawyer, it will get a school kind of moving on things. And I think that it can be, you would be surprised sometimes how you may have no more knowledge about the law than the caseworker you're working with, but for whatever reason, the fact is people start reacting sometimes when a lawyer gets involved. So there's some power in that position that you can use for a good purpose.
I think, similarly, we have at least one attorney, I think, in the room who's worked for a school district, Trish, right? So I think that even if you are, not representing kids or parents who are in either one of these systems, there's a lot that can be done by being active with your school board, or being a proactive parent in a school district and asking questions about how these populations are served and what's being done for them, or stepping forward and saying you would be willing to provide some assistance, to ask about or strategize about implementation, and create a friendly face in the crowd for school districts. I think a lot of school districts feel like they're hearing from people who are upset about residency. This person doesn't really live here, etc. Are they hearing about the kids who really need support in the community and not to be stigmatized? So even if we speak up, or we're part of bar associations or other groups that interact with schools or do things with schools, that's an opportunity to spread the word about the law.
I think we're out of time. One more question.
I was just going to say it would be helpful to include the birth parents, because even though they're separated from their children, it doesn't mean they don't care about the child's education. And in those circumstances, the parents want better than maybe what they had. And if they see someone is advocating for their child's education, that's a strength-based perspective. And a lot of times, work parents get left out of many services, and it's almost like they don't matter, but they do. And although those circumstances, made the children become part of the system, it doesn't mean they don't love their kids. It just means we just don't have everything that we may have to parent our kids. But if you keep them inclusive in the circle, it's going to really create for stronger communication and stronger empowerment for the child and for the parent.
Right. It's an excellent point to just make sure that the child's parent continues to be involved in education decision making. I mean, the statistics show 50% of students in the child welfare system are going to go back to their parents formally, and a great number of them are going to go back to their parents informally. So making sure that they're involved in their education throughout is the best way to make sure they're getting their needs met. All right, here's our contact information. We're all here. If you have questions, after right now we can stay, and also please stay in touch via email. We're just so thankful that you're here because it shows that there's a room full of advocates that are really focused on making an educational change. So thank you.